What's up guys, ATCG here, welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck of the Day. Today we have another one of those classic themes that was never actually a deck, but with the release of a new structure deck, Charmers are finally a deck of their own. They have a full-fledged win condition, and they have a lot of cool plays they can do now that all are cohesive with each other. So here is a deck that I know a lot of people wanted to see, I know a lot of people were expecting, because these cards had a lot of fun surprisingly, even though they were not really a playable archetype. But now those players can enjoy a deck of the past that has become really good deck right now. So without further ado, let's begin. So we have 2 copies of Familiar Possessed Area, the water one. Familiar Possessed monsters actually have effects to special summon themselves from the hand, but they are not very optimal because they require you to run the Charmers. And these are not really good cards because they're just vanillas. So by making these cards just vanillas, you use them for their attribute and for their names. And this is why, because the new monsters that got released, the Awakening, need to play different attributes and different spellcasters in order to be special summoned. So by using these effects, you can actually make use of the stats of these cards and the attributes. So the 1850, 15 defense is very important, and the attributes also really matter. Next, we have 2 copies of Familiar Possessed Ausa. The reason I play 2 copies of Variant Ausa is because I run the actual attributes for the Awakening of the Possessed monsters. I think the Water and the Earth one are actually better ones, and this is because of not because of the Charmers, but because of their familiars that you play in the deck. I'm going to show you later, and this is why I think you need to play 2 copies of these 2. But having said that, I also run 1 copy of Hita and 1 copy of Win. These 2 are here because of their attributes, so the deck can actually summon all 4 different links it has, because the deck didn't get support just now. It was getting the new link monsters in the previous sets. These were never really Charmer support because they were generic, but this deck can actually use all of them, and it's important to be able to summon all of them, mainly because you don't know what you're going to be facing. So if you play a deck that can summon a fire monster from their opponent's grave, then you need to be able to access Hita. So this is why you need to play 1, same with Win. So I did enjoy to play all 4 of those attributes, even though it adds a little bit more of a brickiness to the deck because the cards don't really do anything, but still is a really good thing to have just to be able to use the extra deck more efficiently. Next, a really good monster you should be maxing in this deck is Fairy Tail Luna because of its stats. It's an 1850 monster, it's a spellcaster that on top of its summoning itself and searching you an 1850 monster also has another effect that helps you bounce your opponent's monsters. Your opponent can stop this effect by sending a second copy of that monster to the grave, but sometimes your opponent either might not have a monster with the same name from the deck, mainly because the monster is an extra deck monster, or the monster is a limited card, or they just don't want to waste more monsters from their deck because they need to keep their resources. So it's a really good disruption, especially against extra deck monsters. So if your opponent, for example, summons a Savage Dragon, then you can just chain Luna to its effect that it doesn't already have a negate, and your opponent probably does not play a second Savage in their extra deck, so you'll just bounce that monster, so it'll be gone off the field for good. Next up, we play 2 of the familiars, which is 3 GB. This card is actually a really good effect because it floats. If it's destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon a monster with 1500 attack and 200 defense from your deck, and the monster you're going to be getting is one of the 3 copies of Nefarious Archfiend Eater of Nefariousness. I do play these 2 because their effects are okay. When Nefarious Archfiend Eater is in the graveyard during your standby phase, and during your opponent's end phase actually, you can target a face-up monster you control, destroy, and special summon this card. So these 2 have effects that help you get more monsters on the field. So this is why I play the corresponding actually Awakening of the Possessed. So the first Awakening of the Possessed I play is 1 GB. You can summon these cards from the deck, which is something that didn't really exist before, except for just 1 card that nobody really knows. There was Thini and the Great Sphinx, was a monster that could special summon a turn from the deck when the Andro Sphinx and Sphinx Talia are destroyed. But now there are a lot of monsters that can do this. You just special summon them from the deck. These do not activate effects, so it's not like your opponent can ask the summon of these. They just summon themselves as a summoning mechanic. So you can special summon this by sending a spellcaster you control and a level 4 lower water monster you control to the grave. So this is where Gigabyte is actually a really good card. And because Gigabyte and Nefarious Eater can be special summoned from your hand if you control a spellcaster, it's very easy to get these on the field. And these Awakening of the Possessed monsters are actually really good effects. So when this is special summoned by its own effect, you can send a random card from your opponent's hand to the grave, and then both players draw a card. So you basically get a free card while your opponent actually goes even because they discard a random card from their hand. And also, if it's sent from the field to the grave, you can add a Spiritual Water Art or a Possessed spell or trap from your deck to your hand. You will not add the Spiritual Water Art. If you want, you can play it because actually the Water Art is a good card because you can tribute a water monster to basically smoke grenade a card of your opponent's hand. So it's a card you can take if you want to. It's not terrible, but I think it's a little bit situational because you need to tribute a water monster specifically. But the cool thing about these cards is that they search the Possessed spell or traps, which is a new card that you have from the structure deck. So even if you link these away, you can basically get whatever you want from the deck because they don't miss timing. It says if, so you can get it wherever you want. And the next one I play is Awakening of the Possessed and Nefarious Archfiend. This one is the Earth monsters. So with the Inferius Eater, it's the same thing with Gigabite. You can just send a face-up spellcaster and a face-up level 4 lower Earth you control to the grave to special summon from the deck. When this special summon from the deck, you special summon a level 4 lower monster from your grave with its effects negated. So you basically get one of the monsters you use to summon it back. So it's not like you negged one to get this. And it has the same effect that if it's sent to the grave, you can add the Spiritual Earth card, which is not playable at all, or one to possess spell or trap. So this is what you're going to be searching. So these two are the ones that get you access to your spells and traps, and they're beaters. And the deck has actually really good ways to get over monsters just by attacking over them. So this is a main win condition, just beat down. But you do have a lot of utility as well with spells and traps. And the deck doesn't need a lot of cards to function, so you can play a lot of hand traps as well. So for the hand traps, I play 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, pretty generic. 3 Effect Veiler. I like Effect Veiler the more people keep playing Dragoon in their decks. The thing with Dragoon is that it doesn't see play in the tier 1 decks, it sees plays in all the road decks. And if you're playing at a local level, if you're playing online, most of the time you're not going to be seeing Dragon Link. You're going to be seeing something with Dragoon. So I think having Veiler in your deck is very, very important. If you want, you can swap the Ash Blossoms with Gamma and find space for a driver as well, just to have extra proof against Anaconda, because Dragoon is such a powerful card. But this deck actually has outs for Dragoon, mainly beating it over before it negates something, or using the Charmers to get one link monsters from your opponent's grave to go into Ningirsu, which is able to out Dragoon very, very easily. For the spells, you play 3 copies of Spirit Charmers. This is a really good card. You discard a card, you take 2 cards from your deck with different names that are Charmer monsters, familiar possessed, or possess spell and traps. You add one of them to your hand and set the other. This card is a really good card, and I know it's once per turn, but it's a quick play spell. So even if you draw 2 copies of this, you can just use one during your own turn, you can use one during your opponent's turn. So it's not even a problem that it's once per turn. This is a really, really insane card, and you need to max it out. Another card that I don't know if it should be maxed out, but I think it's really good card because it gives a lot of the deck. So it's the field spell, the Grand Spiritual Iterin. This card, first of all, it has a mandatory negation effect for a monster effect. Your opponent can actually play around this quite easily because it negates the first monster effect they use if you control a spellcaster with 1500 defense. But during your main phase, you can reveal a spellcaster from your hand and then add a monster with the same attribute, but with 1500 attack and 200 defense, and then shuffle the revealed card into the deck. So this searches your Gigabite and your Inferius Eater by revealing Area and your Ausa. So this is a really good card, and I think the negation is something that your opponent has to play around, and it doesn't really disrupt the opponent because they get to choose which effect will get negated, but still they have to use something to bait this and then start doing their plays, which is better than just letting them do their plays uninterrupted. So I think it's a really good card, and I'm also playing 1 Terraforming to search it because it gives you a lot of utility and some kind of disruption. Next up, we have the trap cards. We have a card that helps this deck break boards, which is Possessed Partnerships. This card not only does it special summon a monster with 1500 defense from your hand or graveyard in attack position, or face down defense, which you're never going to do, but you just summon in attack position. And then if you control 2 monsters with 2 or more different attributes, you can destroy a face-up card on the field. So it's a disruption card, which is really, really good, and you can search this very, very easily with your Spirit Charmers or the Awakening of the Possessed monsters when they send to the grave. And it also has a great effect. You can banish this from your grave, target a possessed continuous spell or trap card in your graveyard, and then place it face up on the field. And the target for this is Unpossessed, which is actually a possessed card because it says possessed in the name, even if it's a different word. It's basically the same thing in the Ritual Beast and Spiritual Beast had back in the day. So this card floats. So first of all, your Charmer monsters you control cannot destroy a battle, and if a familiar possessed monster you control attacks an opponent's monster, it will gain 100 attack, so it helps you beat down your opponent. And if a monster you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, if this is on the field, you special summon a spellcaster with 500 defense from your deck with whose attribute is different from one of those destroyed monsters. So it's good to play a lot of different attributes just because this card helps you float more monsters on the field. So if your opponent starts destroying your monsters, you get more monsters from your deck, which is really good. And the extra boost helps you attack over a lot of things, which is the problem of the deck, is that it basically has this cap of 1850 sometimes, but this boost helps you get over a lot of stuff. And the last card is 3 Infinite Impermanence, because if you can afford Infinite Impermanence, I think you should be playing it because it's an effect Veiler that doesn't trigger triple Tactics Talent, so it's a really, really good card. For the extra deck, let's start with the actual Charmers. We have 1 Hira, the Wind Charmer Verdant, 1 Ausa, the Earth Charmer Immovable, 3 the Water Charmer Gentle, and 1 the Fire Charmer Blaze. So the fact that you can play all of these in the deck is a very, very good advantage, because with all these different attributes, you can special summon all of them, and depending on what your opponent is playing, you can choose which one you want to summon. In most decks, you want to be playing like 1 or 2 of these mostly, depending on what decks you expect to play against. Because if you're playing against a format that has a lot of fire monsters, and playing against Salamangreats or Sky Strikers, and you choose to play Hira in your deck. If you're playing against a deck that has a lot of Mermails or something, you play your area. But in a random format, if you don't know what you're going to play against, these cards do not really serve a purpose because they might be dead and slot in the extra deck. In this deck, however, this does not matter, because unless you're playing against a deck that basically plays only light and dark monsters, one of these is going to be live most of the time. And you can summon all of them, so you can link climb time a lot of monsters, which is why this deck has a lot of utility. It has a lot of monsters in the extra deck that helps it break boards and do a lot of stuff, because with these you can make Link 4s very, very easily. Now, the rest of the Link monsters are all utility. So we have the 3 Nightmares, Cerberus, Phoenix, and Unicorn. You can summon these very easily, especially Unicorn with one of your Charmers. We have Vanilling Ningirsu, because Ningirsu helps you break Dragoon, which is one of the banes of the existence of Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now, because you need to be able to out this. If your deck doesn't have an auto Dragoon, then you're going to lose most of your games, because pretty much every single deck can summon Dragoon. We have the Link 4s, which is the best utility of the deck. We have one Apollousa, which negates stuff. Borload, another auto Dragoon, and it's actually a better auto Dragoon than Ningirsu if you can make this without going neg infinite, because you can just take the Dragoon, and after you take it, you use Dragoon's effect to pop the entire field, and then you have a negate for the following turn. Boral Sword, another very easy card to summon. You can OTK. I play the 2 Topologics. Whenever I play the Charmers, I really like the Topologics because they are Link 4s that need 2 effect monsters to be summoned. So if you steal a Link 2, you cannot actually summon any of the Boral monsters because they need 3 monsters at least. But Bomber and Zeroboros are actually Link 4s that require only 2 monsters. So if you steal a Phoenix or something, you can summon these very easily. Bomber is a really good card to destroy the main monster zones and deal more damage. And I will usually summon Zeroboros against decks that use cards like Desires or Extravagance, so it can get a boost. Unfortunately, I don't think you can play any of these 2 cards in this deck. I've seen people play Extravagance, but I think the extra deck is kind of important because it gives a lot of utility to the deck, so you sacrifice a lot of utility and a lot of power if you play Extravagance, so I think you should not be playing this deck. Next up, we have one Unchained Abomination, which is another really good card that requires only 2 monsters, so even if you still Link 2, you can summon this, and it requires a Link monster, which is not a problem because your Charmers are Link monsters, and this actually helps you clear boards because during your end phase you pop a card. If you destroy a card on the field by battle, you pop a card, or if another card on the field is destroyed by a card effect except this effect, you can just pop another card. So you get a lot of disruption and a lot of destruction out of this, so it's a really good card. And I play once for a Yugioh because sometimes you just need to dig for some cards, and it's not very difficult to special summon a lot of monsters in this deck because of the familiars. By special summoning Gigabytes, Nefarious Eater and stuff, and by stealing monster with the Charmers, it's very, very easy to summon this even with 4 different monsters, so you can actually dig for some cards. So yep, that's the deck, guys. It's a really, really fun deck. I'm so glad that we have finally had a deck that can play Familiar Possessed Charmer strategy without having to rely on Floodgates or just playing Beatdown with Familiar Possessed and Luna. The deck actually has a strategy of its own round, so it's a really, really good deck, and it's a very fun. If you are a fan of this deck, I suppose you pick up the structure deck. I suggest you try it out. It's a really, really good deck. You will have a lot of success and a lot of fun with it, and it's a fairly budget deck. I mean, the only thing that's not really budget I show you right now is Impermanence, but I'm pretty sure that we're going to get a Budget Infinite Impermanence reprint very soon, maybe in Maximum Gold, but we'll have to wait for that. So yep, if you enjoyed this video, guys, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming videos, and we'll see you next time.